Welcome to DS Trucks. In today's video, I want to talk about this power outlet that I installed in my truck. It is a constant 12-volt outlet. It provides a charge for your phone even when the truck is off, and it's installed up here on the dashboard right where the phone mount is. And really what I want to talk about in this video is how to find constant 12-volt power for an accessory like this, whether it's a dash camera or like in our example, a PowerPoint that stays on. How to find 12 volts when at all times, 12 volts, no matter if the key is on or off. This is really nice because, like I said, I can charge my phone. So let's pull down this panel here and see what we got. All right, guys, so with the panel down, you can see this wiring here with all the different components that were added to the truck. I tucked my wiring underneath this panel. It worked out real nice. I got a piece of tape here just on top of it, just so it stays flat and it doesn't show. But you can see that the items that I added to the truck are fused, as you can see right there. One is a GPS unit, GPS tracking. Now you might be wondering, why would you add GPS tracking to a truck that already has GPS tracking built in? Well, the reason is, if you unhook this battery, then the forward pass that's built into the truck will be inoperative. So if you want to steal this truck, unhook the battery, boom, your forward pass is now inoperative. Now, if you have another GPS tracker in the truck, that will still be active even if you unhook the battery. Even if you take out all the wiring, you'd have to actually remove the GPS tracker, which is too much work if you're just going to steal the truck, because I think it would take too long to figure out where that tracker is. If that's the only tracker in the truck, you know, there could be a GPS tracker hidden anywhere in the truck on top of that one. And even if you unhook this GPS tracker in this truck, it's still going to be pinging and warning and doing all kinds of things. Matter of fact, as soon as you unhook this tracker, it's going to notify me that the tracker has been unhooked. So that is why that is in here. So on top of the forward pass. Now the forward pass is cool and it's nice, but the people who steal these, they know how to disconnect that. They can put a scanner on it, turn it off. They could just unplug the battery and your truck's gone. Whereas with this setup, you know, if you're going to steal this truck and you want to disable forward pass, they know exactly what module to unplug. Now, for ground's real easy. I just tapped into this metal plate. I did put tape over these sharp edges just to keep the chafing down on any wiring. Now, the fuse is right here for the PowerPoint that we added. If you look back in here, you can see the ground screw. It's way back in there, but for grounding, I just tapped into this black wire right here, and it's tied onto the metal frame, adding a screw right there. If you can see that right back there. So that's how I handle the grounding, straight and simple. Now for the power, this is where it gets interesting. For constant 12-volt power, I tapped into the mirror spotlight module. Let me crawl under here and show you guys how I did that. All right, guys, for constant 12-volt power, for my PowerPoint and for my GPS, I tapped into the mirror spotlight module. And the reason I did that is because the items that I'm installing do not use a lot of power. Now, if I was going to use something that used more power, I would run a line to the battery. But in my case, my constant 12 volt for something small draw that has a small power draw, I am going to be honest, I'm kind of running a risk by tapping into this. But essentially, I took a test light, I grounded it, and I probed the back of this, and I found 12 volts constant right here on the back of the mirror spotlight module. Now, the beauty of this is you could always find one of these, typically in a Ford truck, even if it doesn't have the mirror spotlight, and that is this button up here. The mirror spotlight is this button right here, something that doesn't really get used. That circuit probably powers a few different lighting items, but the reason I like this is because it's already fused from the factory, and if it is too much, it's gonna just blow the fuse. Now, if I were gonna run like a power outlet, like a cigarette lighter style outlet, I would actually prefer to tap off of the cigarette lighter, but the cigarette lighter is not 12 volts with the key off. You can't run a cigarette lighter style outlet off of just that, because typically that needs to be fused to like 15 or even 20 amps. Because if you think about it, for a cigarette lighter, you could plug in things like air compressors and things like that, so that wouldn't be enough for a actual cigarette lighter. But in this case, it's just a cell phone charger, and it is actually still a little bit risky. It could still technically overload that circuit. If all the lights were turned on and you're charging 3 devices, I don't know for sure if that circuit is fused big enough to handle that, but it should be okay. It should be okay. Now, if I wanted to add a power point to the inside of the truck, and I wanted to power something that had a bigger draw, I would actually get underneath the hood and run a circuit right from the battery. So if I needed a bigger circuit, for example, an amplifier, whatever, something that's going to have a bigger draw, something like a power inverter, but even something like a cigarette lighter port where I'm going to plug in an air compressor or something that's going to have a big draw, I would use the battery, and I would come off of the positive terminal with a 20 amp inline fuse. Now from there, you could find the pass-through wires, but you'd have to find a wire heavy enough to handle the 20 amp, or you'd have to put your own wire through the firewall, which isn't terribly hard to do. It is doable, but if you could just use the pass-through wires, which are wires that are already here, they're already in position, they already go through the firewall, there should be a 8-gauge wire available for you to tie into, which you can run a 20 amp circuit on and run a really good power outlet that's on at all times. And that's the key that I think a lot of people want, is they want something that's on at all times. Now, that would have been a lot more work for me, so I am just doing it like this with the mirror spotlight module. But you know, if you were going to run something a little bit more heavy duty, that would be the way to go. But the trick would be to just look online real quick at what gauge wire you want to run to match with what fuse you want to run, because you never want to run you don't ever want to tap into your battery without fusing right after you relatively close to where it is tied into the battery. And that way, if there's ever any chafing or damage to the wire, then it is at least fused and it won't continue to arc. Like if you look at this is our snowplow hookup. It's fused right next to the battery, and that's kind of how you want to do anything that you tie directly to your battery. All right guys, so looking at my 2019 F250, and it does not have the mirror spotlights, but if we look underneath here, you can see that it has the wiring for the mirror spotlights, even though it doesn't have the mirror spotlights. So let's grab a test light and see if this is hot with the key off. All right guys, so I got the test light here, and I'm gonna set the camera down, and we're gonna go ahead and probe this. Now keep in mind, this circuit is typically available on your Ford pickup trucks. Let's stick a pin in here, and look at that. We got 12.5 volts hot with the key off. And then when I was doing this initially, I was kind of looking at the wiring. I think there's actually 2 ports in here that have 12 volts. I think they're on the corners here. Let's see here. There we go, 12 volts. And then I was actually looking at the wiring. Like, how thin is that wire? Right there. 12 volts. Now, it is a relatively thin wire, so I wouldn't recommend running nothing heavy off of this. There we go again, 12 volts. Now, this one's a little bit heavier. It's right there. A little bit heavier. So you could run a GPS unit off of this instead of doing a whole bunch of tearing up to figure out, you know, instead of running wires and having all this stuff, I would just cut that wire and use that as my 12 volt hot, and then just hook up a GPS, a dash cam, or something that doesn't draw a lot. Now for something that has a big draw, like a power outlet, I would, you know, an actual cigarette lighter, I would actually tie to the battery for that. Now for this, like I say, that mirror spotlight module is prime location, guys. Prime location. So that is how I did it. And this might help you if you have a Ford F-150. Believe it or not, these F-150s, if you got like an XLT, the wiring harness is the same. It's going to have that 12 volts. And even this truck, this is an XL F-250, and it has no mirror spotlights, and it still has the wiring, and it's a pretty decent sized wire. It's probably fused for like 10 amps, but like I said, I don't exactly know. But I'm gonna look into that and figure out what exactly it's fused for. Anyway, see you guys in the next video. My name is Sean. This is DS Trucks. Over and out.